Right, I'm gonna make us a wee video here about Zendaya. Hi, I'm Dan. I think too much about pop culture and I'm a nostalgia junkie, and the perfect middle of that Venn diagram is the 1990s. The 90s were just better, alright? I don't know how else to say it. I've said it a few times already, but it was. It was a decade of economic prosperity. The landscape culturally was rich, it was fertile, there was so much going on. I'm sorry you weren't there, okay? And if you were there, let them know in the comments. I ain't telling lies. I mean, look, it was a decade where humans existed, so sociologically speaking, it could still be a bit of a nightmare factory. But on a cultural level, the landscape of the art, the fashion, the film, the music, our appreciation for those things, it was just so good. I think when you look back at decades in pop culture, they can be quite easily defined. So if we think of the 50s, it's rock and roll and Elvis. The 70s, Donna Summer, disco, Hairspray. Scooching forward into the 2000s, you've got like the paparazzi era, you've got Britney, you've got Spidey, you've got the Kardashians, the reality TV of it all. But if you look at the 90s, there are so many different candidates, things like music, Alanis Morissette, Janet Jackson signing the biggest record deal of all time, the Spice Girls, for crying out loud. Or in the fashion world, it's the supermodel boom, Naomi Campbell walking that catwalk, RuPaul is involved in that. And while all of those are great candidates, for me, I think that the 90s are dominated by the movie star. Hollywood is what I think about the most. Obviously, it's the industry that I want to be in. It's the thing I've loved since I was a child. But in the 90s specifically, it is such a key touchstone, especially when you think about who is dictating and driving, not just the film industry in general, but us as audience members going to movies. And in the 90s, it's all based around the movie star. And I think over the past decades, it is impossible to argue that the movie star has somewhat died a death. But over the weekend, a film came out called Challengers, and I watched the whole thing with a massive smile on my face. You must go and see it. I'm evangelical about this. But not only was it something that I thought was artistically outstanding, I also had this feeling the whole way through that I was watching what could be the rebirth of the movie star through Zendaya. I'm gonna go sit over there. Do you wanna come down? Should we talk about this? Let's talk about it. Right, now, if I was smarter about this, I would have come up with a plan. I would be ready to point evidence, explain this whole shebang. As it is, it's just something I've been thinking about, so I have no structure. Let's just see where we go, shall we? I feel like a good place to start is what is a movie star? Because when I'm saying that there aren't movie stars anymore, you might be like, excuse me, Ryan Gosling, Emma Stone, Keke Palmer, Jennifer Lawrence. And that all makes sense to me, but there is something about literally a movie star, i.e. a person who is in films and is known for being in films, and a movie star. Do you know what I mean? The vibe of a starlet. Because movie stars, since essentially the dawn of Hollywood, are as close as America has to a royal family, if that makes sense. Beautiful, wealthy people who appear to live the glamorous life that we... This is where it would have been helpful to do the point evidence explain and really have thought this process through. I know what I mean, and I think you do too, so we're just gonna move past it. But I think the key distinction in explaining what I mean by movie star is the draw, is that nowadays, we don't necessarily go and see movies because of who is in them. In the same way that in times gone by, we would flock to see the new Meg Ryan movie, the new Julia Roberts movie, the new George Clooney film. Now, we go and see the new Marvel film. We go and see the new Disney film. We would probably, even if you're a movie fan, like a heavy movie goer, your version of that is, I really want to go and see the A24 film. Or maybe it's directors. We'll go and see the Christopher Nolan film. We'll go and see the Jordan Peele film. Or we go and see stuff because there's an IP, so we're going to go and see the new franchise. I can't wait to go and see the new Star Wars movie. I can't wait to go and see the new Mission Impossible movie. Barbie, which came out last year, and was the top movie of the year by every metric, is a really interesting example, because that movie was Margot Robbie's movie. You know, she produced it, she made it happen, she starred in it, she did all the promotion for it. But I don't think people generally, at least your casual audience, went to see it because Margot Robbie was in it. They didn't even go and see it because Greta Gerwig directed it. They went to see it because it was a Barbie movie. That's my distinction between someone who is a star because they're in the movies and a movie star. So why don't they really exist anymore? Well, I think it's because of the lack of the mid-budget movie. And that goes into why Hollywood operates the way Hollywood operates at the moment. Studio executives trying to make loads and loads of money, banking on franchises and IP, and also streaming. And it's the confluence of those two things. Because of the way that the Hollywood industry exists now, and talking about that in detail is a whole other movie, so I'll try and keep it in brief, it has meant the death of the mid-budget movie, and the mid-budget movie is the playground for movie stars. So to use an example from the 90s, the high-budget movie is something like an Armageddon, the low-budget movie is something like the Blair Witch Project, and then your mid-budget movies are You've Got Mail, that kind of thing. Your high-budget movie is your blockbuster that has a high budget because it's gonna make loads of money because it's gonna be in every single theater, and in the past those were considered tent poles that would allow for other movies to be made along the way. because that's where you're going to get your budget from. But nowadays, it seems like that's kind of the only thing that they're interested in, because they're trying to drive prices up and drive subscriber numbers to their streaming platforms, because everything is about vertical integration and pleasing the shareholders, stockholders. This is the economic part where I don't fully know the ins and outs of it. I just sense it. And what is economics and stocks if not vibes, you know? Like, the stock market is just astrology for finance bros. That's all I'm saying. To bring it back to the idea of the mid-budget movie, it was Matt Damon on Hot Ones, Matt Damon himself being someone I would consider a movie star and very much a beneficiary of the mid-budget movie, who kind of essentially pointed out that the lack of the home video market means the mid-budget movie has nowhere to go, because there's no guarantee on your return of investment. Back in those days, you didn't necessarily have to worry about recouping all of your costs through your theatrical release, because there was a thriving home video market. So your movie would go out, have a theatrical run, and then it would go to DVD and go to rental stores, and that's where you would make back a lot of your money. I can't remember specifically how much it cost to rent a video from Blockbuster, but if you think about how that contrasts to the Netflix model now, wherein rather than going to the Blockbuster or your local video store and paying $4, for instance, for a rental each time you go, or even buying and owning DVDs, the sort of $9, $10 you'd spend on buying a DVD, you now spend once a month for Netflix to have access to all the films. And that obviously decreases the value of those films, if that makes sense. So because there are now fewer ways for those mid-budget movies to make their money back, and I'm not gonna go into the economics of Netflix because that is something that fries my brain, that means there's kind of less incentive to make that mid-budget movie that was the platform for the movie star. Now, there is so much that can be spoken about with Netflix and streaming, and how I sense like almost a return to the studio system, insofar as Gillian Anderson is in everything for Netflix, ergo she's like the stars who were signed to the studios way back in the day, like when you were signed to an MGM or a Paramount Pictures and they managed every part of your career and picked your projects for you and things like that. I find that kind of interesting. There's also the whole conversation about whether or not constant access, immediate access to music, to movies, to television, when you put an entire series of a show on Netflix at the same time, it doesn't have enough room to breathe. Like Taylor Swift just released 30 songs on one album, and you have to listen to them all immediately. You have to listen to it on that same day so that you can be part of the conversation. When the entire series of Stranger Things dropped, you had to book the day off so that you could watch the whole thing, so that you could be part of the conversation, so you could avoid spoilers, so you would understand the memes, so that you could be part of it, because if you left it too long, then you would just miss out on all of that. So there's a whole conversation to be had around the streaming services, the streaming wars, and what they have done to the monetary, but also the emotional value of art. But this isn't that video, because I'm going off on tangents and I'm gonna hone back in on the movie star, because that's what movie stars are. That's why they don't exist now. But here's why I think Zendaya is either the last movie star or one of the first in a new wave of movie stars. Challengers is a film about 3 tennis players who meet each other on the sort of junior circuit, go off to college, and then progress through their careers, and their stories are all intertwined with each other. It is a movie laced with sex, with ambition, with drive, manipulation, love, hate, sweat and tennis rackets. It's all of these things. It's a fantastic film. This incredible mind-bending score, incredible performances, a fantastic script that is so heavy-handed with its metaphor that it loops back around to become incredibly thoughtful and nuanced. I'm evangelical about it and I want everybody to go and see it. But when I said earlier on that people don't go and see movies because of who's in them anymore, I thought of examples like this. Let's look at the headlines around the opening box office weekend for The Marvels, which stars someone who is very famous for being in movies, Brie Larson. It's all saying things like MCU, latest MCU offering, MCU box office. One of my favorite films from last year was Mission Impossible movie. It's another Mission Impossible film. We're talking about things in terms of franchises. When I talk to people about movies, I talk about them in terms of franchises. When I talk to people about this movie, the way I've been describing it, I said, I really want to go and see that new film Challengers. Oh, what's that film? It's the sexy Zendaya tennis movie. Zendaya is the headline for this movie. Speaking of headlines, here are the headlines from the box office opening weekend. Zendaya, Zendaya, Zendaya. It's all about her. When I think about the press tour that she's been on, she is being styled to look like a Brigitte Bardot fashionista icon. The wigs, the dresses, it's all so glamorous, so exceptional. To use an overused phrase, it's giving movie star. So that's to do with this specific bit of work. The other part of it is to do with her as a personality, or rather what we don't really know of her as a personality. The age of social media, the paparazzi era, has meant that we as a culture, we've always liked the idea of knowing how the other half live. We've always liked the idea of getting an insight into celebrity. But the rise of social media and the accessibility that that has given us to famous people, the celebrities they're just like us kind of energy, it breeds itself to demystifying. That star aura, that idea that they've been plucked from the heavens so that we can all get a glimpse of them, it's not there if I know what they have for breakfast. It's not there if I know how they go about cleaning their house. It's not there if I know their morning routine. Because if their morning routine is just like mine, well, they're not special, right? We've always wanted to know bits and bobs about these people. We've always wanted to know maybe how they decorate their house, or who are they dating at the moment, or what is the scandal of their divorce. Like, that's been throughout celebrity history as long as the newspapers and celebrities have been a thing. We wanted a glimpse of Marilyn Monroe's life, right? I'm talking about the immediacy of the access and the wealth of knowledge. There's almost something about wanting to know a little bit about the person, but not knowing too much. A really interesting example of this is Taylor Swift, who is the biggest star on the planet at the moment, and yet we know so much about her personal life. And yet, do we know so much about her personal life? Because really, what we know of, and I'll point you to Lena Norm's fantastic video about Taylor Swift, sort of required reading for this portion of what I'm about to say, we know Taylor Swift the person, except we don't. We know Taylor Swift the artist and Taylor Swift the business. In between those things, we have to glean what information we can to know about Taylor Swift the person. Then she as an artist drops Easter eggs left, right and center, trying to encourage fans to read in to sort of figure out, who is this song about? What is this in reference to? What album is coming next? What can we glean from this little bit of breadcrumb trail that she's drawn out for us? I suppose Easter egg hunt was the metaphor staring me right in the face, but I just didn't take it. Anyway, the point being, we know about Taylor Swift exactly what she wants us to know. And yet we feel like we know more. And that's why she still has something of an aura. Zendaya is similar. I know Zendaya is in a relationship with Tom Holland, her co-star in the superhero movie. I don't know anything beyond that. I couldn't tell you where they live. I think they probably divide the time between like London and LA, but I don't know the ins and outs of their relationship. I don't know the ins and outs of their behavior. I don't know what Zendaya does for breakfast, which keeps her in that sort of rarefied air just that little bit further away. She still remains a sort of shiny object. That's a movie star. I know more about Will Smith's marriage than I've ever wanted to know, right? Because of social media, accessibility, people bringing you in. Zendaya and Tom Holland have done a very smart job of sort of keeping themselves at a distance, even while being in one of the biggest superhero franchises going. They're both in the MCU. They're in the Spider-Man movies. And that's energy that feels movie star to me. I don't know, I just find it really interesting. This is probably where the video is going to end. It's just an interesting point to see that we are at potentially a turning point in Hollywood with the strikes that went down last year, which incidentally are the reason that this movie was delayed. It was going to be released in October, but was delayed because of strikes, because of actors and writers fighting for, I believe, their right to be paid fairly, to get an equal share of the profit, which is being denied to them through things like studio executives and streaming platforms. And I'm not an economist, I'd need to do even more research, but the streaming platform model is potentially on the way out. And the mid-budget movie is making somewhat of a resurgence. Anyone But You had a massive success at the start of this year as a rom-com. I think people just want that kind of movie. People want that kind of cinema-going experience again. So, if we are to believe that Hollywood is changing, and we're seeing Zendaya ride this wave of, to my mind, she feels like a star that's been pulled from the sky. That metaphor once again. I'm really fascinated to know where that's going to go. Anyway, that's kind of all I've got to say. That's just something I've been thinking about this week. What about you?